Okay. I know everybody is very excited for tonight's episode. It's been a little while, Lee, since we've had High Dive. There's been just so many different things going on, and we're finally ready today to get back into the fold. And, you know, it's the 1 year anniversary. Always seems like the wrong word, but it's the
that's
1
the right
year
word, yeah.
anniversary since George Floyd's death. How are you tonight, Lee?
I'm doing well. I want to thank you, Jason, for all your help and support. You helped me set up on Patreon, and I want to thank everybody for their support. It's been a weird few months. As you know, I had a stroke, a minor one, a few months ago, but I'm feeling a lot better. And I had to continue my radio show because they pay me, and that was kind of all I could do for a while. But now I'm back up to about 10,000. I'm averaging about 8,000, 9,000 steps a day, which lack of mobility I had during the winter months up here in South Dakota was a big factor in what had happened to me. But I'm back and I'm feeling pretty good. And so there we go. So hi.
You look good. You're looking well. I know everybody is happy to see you back. I got a lot of emails. People were concerned. And I know that people have been tuning in to the backstory with Lee Stranahan and John Kiriakou on Sputnik Radio. It's always a lively conversation on there. I know you and John don't always agree, but that's kind of part of the point, right?
It is, yeah. And it's part of what I like. But I also like parts where I don't disagree with Mike.
Whoops, we lost your sound there, Lee. Oh, that's back.
Hang on. You back? Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
But no, I love doing the show with John, but it's nice to do a show where it's not about arguing.
Right.
Or even
well, you got a divorce about arguing. You got a radio show about arguing. This is a non-argumentative show here. Yeah,
not that John and I disagree on everything. We don't. We agree. We had a thing today on transgender surgery for minors.
Whoa!
And we agreed on that, so that was good.
Yeah.
So there we go. But yeah. But it's been nice, and I've been busy. And let me just mention, I mentioned earlier, you were kind enough to help me set up my Patreon. And I'm going to, one of the things I've been doing, and one of the reasons I didn't rush to come back was I want to make sure I'm sustainable. You know what I mean? Where... Mm-hmm. I didn't want to come back for a week and then be gone for 3. And I didn't want to come back and not be set up on Patreon. And I've had a number of book projects that I've talked about doing and have wanted to do for some time. And this ties directly into what we're going to be talking about tonight with the Black Panthers, as you'll see in a second, Jason. So my strategy on getting books done previously was planning to get the books done and inwardly calling myself an idiot. That was my plan. And
that's a good plan.
where basically I felt guilty that I hadn't got more done on the books. And I don't have any books out right now. And then I thought about it and I realized that I host a radio show every day. And even though the radio show is only 2 hours a day, I got to prep for the radio show.
Yeah.
So it's a
like it takes all day. Job. It's research, it's technical stuff.
Right. And I also, as part of this way, since I was sick, I've been rethinking about just a lot of things. And part of it is trying to align my goals with what I'm good at and who I am and what I'm interested in. And so I figured out a way to do the books that I haven't talked anywhere about. And I've been working on this for a few weeks, and it's a workable way to do the books. And here's what it is. I realized that on some of the material that I have, for instance, we'll be talking about the Black Panther Party today and the history of the Black Panther Party. I have so much material, Jason, 13 years of reporting, stuff I worked on at Huffington Post, stuff I worked on with Andrew Breitbart, stuff I worked on independently, blah, 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 blah. I don't have any books out. And I came up with the idea of doing a series of books that I'm calling Reporters' Notebooks. And what the Reporters' Notebooks are, and they'll be available as a series, and the first one is going to be about the history of the Black Panthers and these 60s radical movements, is it's taking the 13 years of research that I have and the hundreds of hours of interviews that I've done and traveling around and everything and putting them together. Look, for instance, about the Black Panthers. It is very hard to find the truth about the Black Panthers. It's very hard. Yeah. You can do an internet search for it, and the first 90 things you'll find are complete fabrications and myths, and we'll talk about that, and why it affects the current George Floyd story, the current Black Lives Matter movement. But what I realized is, if I put the book out almost like you're reading a binder of hundreds of pages of my notes, and in some cases, written interviews I've done with really important people. I can do this about Russiagate, about Pigford, about the Black Lives Matter movement, about Occupy Wall Street, about all these different topics. I can let people, it's almost like they're peering over my shoulder while I'm researching, but it'll be available in book form. And I think people are really going to like them because it allows people to read the source material themselves and put the story together, and then they can contrast it with other material that they find on their own. And so,
one thing, Lee, I think this is an interesting approach as well, because, all of this kind of self-published stuff and doing these types of ventures, it allows you to do things that a traditional book publisher would never let you do. So we don't really know if people will like that or not like that. I think they will, because it's going to be a unique approach, and it almost invites people into your research process.
It does. And some of the material that I rely on, I'll give you an example, and anyone who's part of my Patreon is going to get a lot or all of their paid subscriber. Even if they're just signed up for the Patreon, they'll get some of the material. But if they're a paid subscriber, they're going to get a lot of the material before it even comes out as a book. And I'll give an example. Today, one of the things we're going to talk about, it's a 1971 report that the House of Representatives did on the Black Panther Party. And it's very hard to find. And if you find it, it's very hard to read because it's a 180-page report. And someone went to a couple of places where they have it and scanned it. It's part of the Google scanning project. But you have to download each page individually. So that's no fun. And then
who thought of that?
And even then, it's the way they do things. But even then, it's not that easy to read. So what I've done is I've taken that. I'm going to send you in just a second here the entire 180-page PDF. But furthermore, I'm going through and I've converted it to text, which I'm then editing. So you'll be able to read it on your Kindle or whatever.
And
on
search
your device. Exactly right. In a more easy to read format. And it's edited for, also the way the report was written.
Edited for what did you say? Clarity, I presume?
Well, yeah. So here's an example. This was a by the way, it's a very good report. It could never be published by Congress today, never.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things about it is it's footnoted extensively. Okay. So from page to page, there's the text, then there's a whole bunch of footnotes. It's not good to read. Does that make sense? Like,
It was like a legal document.
it's like a legal document, which is no fun to read.
No.
So what I've done is I move the footnotes away so the text itself is like the text of an article. One continuous block. Then I'll make reference other places. A lot of the interviews that I've done over the years with people who knew the Panthers, that's going to be included. When I get to Russiagate, for instance, I'm going to include the complete, the transcript of my interview with Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Russian attorney, for instance. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people. Yeah. And this really puts all the key elements of this material out there. And the books are all going to be affordable, you know. And that way, I think people are really going to like this format. Furthermore, it's very sustainable. It's pretty easy for me to do. And because I've already got the material. So it's basically taking the material, it's taking the work that I've done and assembling it for people. And again, if people want to be part of the process now, they can get on Patreon. The other thing we're going to do on Patreon is after my radio show every day for subscribers, I'm going to do an exclusive, 5-10 minute debrief on that day's show. And I'm, mentioning to people what I thought the highlights of the show were and that kind of thing. So my Patreon, and again, people can get to my show with you through your Patreon or mine, is going to have a lot more material. And it's all stuff I've designed so that I can do it. And I'm not just beating myself up, because really I was. I'm not joking. It was really just me going, man, I suck as an author. And I'll tell you, I do. I suck as an author.
I think it was more of a time management thing than an authoring thing.
Well, I'll tell you though, David Horowitz, who I know and I consider a friend. I was once talking to Horowitz, and he said, I said, you've been so productive. He said, writing is an unnatural process. And he's right. It's an unnatural process. And I realized the part that I dreaded was the composing prose in addition to everything else I was doing. But I don't need to. People don't need the prose. They can go, it's easier for me to give the highlights and say, and here's the material. And they can get what they want out of it. So we'll see. I have other books I may do differently. But that's the plan on a series of books that I really think people are going to like. And I'll tell you the other completely nerdy. But there was
before we do that, just one thing I want to remind people is that they can get to Lee's Patreon page by going to patreon.com/Stranahan, and you can sign up right now. Lee's going to be loading up all of our past videos over time, and you're going to be able to see the sponsor exclusive videos simulcast on there. Of course, they're also available to subscribers of subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And, you've reminded me of something, Lee. It's been a long time since we last spoke, and I was in Florida when this first came up, that there was an interview, I forget the guy's name, who was with the Black Panthers, who had dumped all these guns off of the Richmond.
Aaron Dixon. Yeah, Aaron Dixon, yeah.
So I have done extensive research into Marine salvation companies there in Marin County. And I also found an incredibly awesome underwater drone that has a Wi-Fi buoy. So I had these visions in my head of you and I in like a rowboat outside the bridge. You drop this thing off the boat and the buoy floats next to the boat and you have like a drone remote control. This thing can go 500 feet underwater. But when I spoke to the salvage company, they basically said, forget it. You would need years, and you'd have to get like a side scanning radar to go, or sonar to go all across and map the thing. And they said it's like 30 years in the current and the silt. He basically said it was a fool's errand to attempt to try to find this stuff.
Interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
So I don't know if we'll
think
do
that
that.
there's some big guns that went down, so I don't know. But
That's what
yeah.
I thought. But this guy didn't want to take the job.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I have drone footage I shot of Huey P. Newton's apartment, for instance. The nerdy reference I was going to make is I love the TV show and the movies and the books for David Lynch's Twin Peaks. And he's got, there's great books out. Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks with him, there's a book, The History of Twin Peaks. And it's fiction, but it shows like newspaper clippings, and like you're like looking at Dale Cooper, the FBI agent played by Kyle MacLachlan. You're like looking at his notebook. And I'm going to do that in the formatting in the book a little bit. So different sections will be in different typefaces, for instance. And like when we talk about some of the stuff, like this guy, Fred Hampton, we'll be talking about today. Fred Hampton was the head of the Black Panthers in Chicago. And this past Oscars, 2 movies that were nominated for the Best Picture. There was one, The Trial of Chicago 7, directed by the great director, Aaron Sorkin, who did A Few Good Men. Aaron Sorkin directed Trial of Chicago 7.
Isn't he the dude who got arrested with mushrooms at the airport?
Who was?
Didn't Sorkin?
I don't know that story, but
it's pretty cool.
I can't argue with that. And then Sorkin, but he did this Trial of Chicago 7. Then the other book was called Judas and the Black Messiah. And that film features Fred Hampton too. And both films are propaganda exercises about Fred Hampton. Now, I have the original material, and some of that was going back to the Chicago newspaper archives. And again, looking up the grand jury report, all of this stuff. But I'm telling you, and the reason it's significant, now we're 50 years on from when Fred Hampton was killed, 1969. So over 50 years, 50-something years, 2 years, right? 3, something like that. And the Black Panthers were formed in 1966. So 54 years ago, something like that. And it is so hard to find the truth about these guys. And we're watching it right now in real time about George Floyd. Obviously, anybody thinking, anyone denying the drug connection to his death needs to explain every bit of behavior up till when he passed out, or even him passing out. Right? Someone explain that to me. Explain to me what led to everything else. Him saying he couldn't breathe when they weren't even on him. Him crying for mama when they weren't even on him. The foam coming out of his mouth. The drugs we know were in his system. This idea that and we saw it today at the White House. George Floyd's family was there. And, he changed the world. No, he didn't. He didn't change the world. He's another in a long series of fictions, myths, lies. And you see it all through the Black Panthers. And you even see it further back. I'll tell you the other thing that's coming up on June 1st. You know what May 31st, June 1st is?
No.
It's the, I believe, 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre.
Oh, is that Black Wall Street?
That is Black Wall Street. Except it's myths, right? So one of the myths, if you
But
go
I
on
thought I saw
Facebook,
pictures of it. Didn't they burn out the whole place?
something
Yeah.
happened. There was a race riot. There
Oh.
there was a race riot. Now, if you go on Facebook, again, here I'm going to point out areas where it's not true, and then something happened, but even the what happened. But let's talk about the consequences.
But actually, wait a second, Lee. I got to pause you for a second because, and this is my fault, I had a password lockout problem, so we started a little bit late, but we're in the moment where we need to make our transition to the sponsor-exclusive segment on patreon.com/Stranahan and Subscribestar and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. So we'll be back in 5 minutes and we'll get into this. Talk about Black Wall Street.
Let me just say the one point here. You will see stories that say 3,000 black people were killed during this. That's not true. In fact, the body count seems to be at most a couple of dozen, and they weren't all black. There were white people killed too, and Hispanic people and Native American people killed too. Now, again, whatever else is going on, this is what I mean. The difference between 3,000 and a couple of dozen is significant, right? So, and again, there's a lot of property damage. There's not a question about that. But again, if you got the truth on your side, you don't need myths. You don't need made up stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll get into all this. And I mean, I know very little about it other than, the mainstream reporting on it. So I'll be interested to hear more about it. And I know very little about the Black Panthers. So we'll see everybody right after this on patreon.com/Stranahan and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Huge thank you to the sponsors of the show. Remember, by eliminating corporate sponsorship of the show, you know that we're not beholden to some corporation that wants us to talk about something or not talk about something. This is information for the people, by the people, and sponsored.